Okay, this is going to be, I think, part 5 of Poor Man's Way to Fight Cancer. This is an excerpt from the book. It's not exactly the same as the book, but I'm showing you the book and I'm talking about the high points of the pictures and I'm providing commentary on it. So this will help you if you're interested in learning about cancer. Okay, so here's a picture of the endothelial glycocalyx. So what does that mean? Endo means inside. Thelial is the lining of something, so it's the lining of your arteries. Glyco means sugar, and calyx means coating. So our arterial linings, the cells, the endothelial cells, have a coating that's made largely out of sugars. It's made out of disaccharides, meaning repeating units of 2 sugars. And the most important one to know about is heparan sulfate. And it's got tons of sulfurs on it. They're negatively charged, so they have a zeta potential. A zeta potential is a negative charge on a cell that makes it repel other negative charges, like your red blood cells, so they don't stick together and form a blood clot. Your white blood cells also have a zeta potential. Okay. And they also will attract water to themselves. And the way that works is water is a polar molecule. You have a bit of a negative charge on the oxygen, and you have a bit of a positive charge on the hydrogens, the H2O. That's called a dipole when there's a partial positive charge, partial negative charge. So anyways, these are little water molecules. The O is the oxygen, the red part. And then the hydrogens are the blue part here with the partial positive charge. And the positive charge attracted to the negative charge. So this creates a very slippery surface. You have the jello-like surface of the endothelial glycocalyx itself, then with a little bit of water on top of it, of these water dipoles attracted to it. And that's the perfect thing to make the red blood cells slide through the capillaries, despite the fact that it's a relatively tight fit. This is like skating on ice that has just a little bit of water on it. It's real slippery. Okay, here's a sulfate. Look at all these negative charges on it. All right. At the tips of the heparan sulfates, at their very tippy tips, you got little bits of sialic acid. Those are also negatively charged. They contribute to the zeta potential. Oh yeah, that reminds me of the phrase, slippery when wet. A little more information about sodium. Every cell in our body has these ion pumps in the plasma membrane, and I put the K first. That represents potassium. It's from the Latin K for kalium, which means potassium in Latin, and then the N is for natrium. That means sodium in Latin. Okay, so the KN pump. I like the K first because K is what comes into the cell. N follows because N is what is pumped out of the cell. Notice that two potassiums are pumped in. Okay, but 3, as in 3, that's more, sodium are pumped out. So this net effect of pumping out more positive charge leads to a net negative charge inside the cell, negative 65 millivolts. And that's relevant because you now have an electrical and a chemical gradient. It's an electrical gradient in the sense that there's a different charge inside the cell compared to what's outside the cell. And it's a chemical gradient in the sense that you're accumulating more sodium outside the cell than inside the cell. So the sodium really wants to come into the cell, both to neutralize its electrical gradient and neutralize its chemical gradient. That means neutralize its concentration, both outside and inside the cell. And so many cells, most cells use at least 1/3 of their energy just to run this pump. It is a major component of how cells get their work done. Nerve cells use 2/3 of their energy to run this pump. And that's why this pump is so important. And that's why these elements, sodium and potassium, are super, 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 super important in a cell. These are like the 3 most important elements, or the 4 most. Potassium, sodium, magnesium, and calcium. Life on Earth depends on these things here, okay? And the normal human diet is, about like at least, 10 times more or 20 or 25 times more potassium than sodium. But humans have flipped it around. We're eating routinely 10 times as much sodium as potassium. That messes up our metabolism and it dissipates these gradients. When you've got decreased pumping power at these gradients, you'll have a harder time pumping calcium out of the cell. When you accumulate calcium inside the vascular smooth muscle cells, vascular smooth muscle is like a light switch. It makes something happen. And in a skeletal muscle cell, or in a vascular smooth muscle cell, it makes those arteries contract. So they, instead of being big, they clamp down. And when those arteries are clamped down, it takes more blood pressure to pump the blood through. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is the more dietary salt you eat, the more sodium, the more likely you're going to be hypertensive. And that's actually a real big deal because it'll mess up your calcium metabolism. Every cell in your body is damaged by a high salt diet. Because that whole plasma membrane electrical charge process is, how the cell does work. It's like a battery. It's the electrical power of the cell. So what I'm trying to say is our cell designed their own electrical system, designed by God. Many, many millions and millions of years ago, life on Earth, mammals had this stuff, okay? It's rather amazing. Okay, this is the best book ever written on hypertension called The High Blood Pressure Solution by Richard Moore, MD, PhD. The book's a masterpiece. The guy devoted his whole life to studying these ion pumps. He's a brilliant guy. And he pretty much explains what I just told you, but in a little more detail. Excess dietary sodium intake increases risk of cancer. Okay, and then he called this the K factor, the ratio of sodium and potassium. He said if you at least keep it higher than 5-to-1, means 5 times as much potassium as sodium, you'll probably be okay. But again, like I said, our ancestors probably ate about 25-to-1. That's about what I eat in my diet, and that just improves cellular health. Okay. By the way, I'm 59. I have 0 medical problems. I'm strong. I squat every week. I can wrestle with my cousin, senior in high school wrestler. I ain't what I used to be when I was 18 years old, but I'm still pretty fit, pretty strong, got the energy. I can concentrate all day. I just tell you that because most people I know my age, most of my doc buddies, they're all slowed down, kind of tired, kind of pale. And the patients over 60, most of them are real cognitively slow, kind of like cows. Hi, yes. Very nice, but, if you want to be mentally slow, how do you want to go through life? You want to go through life being the best you can be, or you want to go through life, always being sick and pathetic, okay? I mean, some people just got bad luck. Bad stuff happens to them, and it's sad, okay? But most people are sick just because they were ignorant, and they didn't know any better. And don't get me wrong, it happened to my dad. He's a doctor. It happened to my mom. She's a social worker. Most Americans, they eat the sad diet, and they get sick, and it's sad. And after seeing all the sickness, I wanted to learn how to make things better. And I found the answers in this nutrition and toxicology stuff, but no one cares about it. There's no money in this stuff. I don't make 10 cents from this. I mean, I'll sell a couple books, but the amount of money is like next to nothing from the time and the effort and everything else that goes into them. It ends up being next to nothing. So it's the right thing to do, and also not to brag, but I think I could become the best doctor in the world. And the reason I say that is I don't have to play any games. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't lie to you about anything. I don't tell you certain things. There's certain things I can't tell you. I'm not allowed to tell you. I'm afraid I'll get in trouble if I tell you certain things. But I tell you as much as I can. And I also tell you where to go to find the information that I can't tell you, if you're smart enough to do that. Go to the other video channels, okay? But I'll tell you as much as I can here with this, okay? And so basically, the body has to maintain a constant amount of all the positive and negatively charged ions. Potassium and sodium are positively charged ions. Those are called cations. And whenever you eat more of one, you lose the other one out in your urine. So if you're eating more dietary sodium, you're going to piss out your potassium. If you eat more potassium, you'll piss out some of your sodium. Fine. We're designed to be just the way we are on a high potassium diet, okay? That's the way everything works optimally. Okay, here's a big diagram of what happens inside a cell. And I think this is actually kind of a pretty cool thing. I mean, this is just what I'm trying to say is God is like so many millions and billions of times smarter than humans. It's not even funny, okay? People tell you need atheism for science. They're full of crap. They don't really know it. I've studied this stuff since I was a little guy back in high school, especially since I was in college. I've been studying biology and science very intensely, okay, at a pretty high level, A+ student level in places like Stanford and Harvard, etc. And I tell you this because you look at the cell. How does a cell work? It's so brilliant. It's genius. Basically, by running this potassium-sodium pump and establishing a chemical concentration gradient and an electrical gradient, it now has a battery. It now has electrical power, and it uses that electrical power to pump whatever it wants to pump. It pumps calcium out of the cell when it doesn't need it. It can pump hydrogen ions, protons out of the cell when it doesn't want them. It can pump in amino acids. It can do all kinds of work. Whatever it needs to do, it's got this electrical power to do it. Okay, and like I said, when calcium comes into a cell, there's a very high concentration of calcium outside a cell, and usually a very low concentration inside the cell. So when calcium comes into the cell, it's a big deal. In a neuron, it stimulates release of neurotransmitters, okay? In a vascular smooth muscle cell, it tells the cell to contract. And if you've dissipated your sodium electrochemical gradient, then you're going to be less able to pump this calcium out. And what that means is you'll have chronic accumulation of calcium inside the skeletal muscle cells. They'll chronically stay contracted, making your arteries contracted, making it harder to push blood through, making blood pressure have to go up. And that elevated blood pressure is going to damage your endothelium, as I showed in the earlier slides, because of the abnormal flow is sensed as injury to the endothelial cells, and that's going to cause clotting, atherosclerosis formation, and subsequent tissue ischemia, lack of oxygen and glucose delivery, and that's going to lead to increased risk of transforming a cell into becoming cancer, or an already established cancer cell, favoring its hypoxic acidotic environment and its growth of the cancer. So it's all bad. So you don't want to eat excess sodium, and that's the whole rationale for that. And I thought that was rather beautiful. You know, when you look at it, it's so sophisticated and complex, and it works so well. It's beautiful. It's genius. It's beyond genius how smart things are in the human body, you know. And people say, oh, how can you believe in God? I don't believe in God. I was like, you know what? Imagine you go to the beach, okay, and you see your name written in the sand, okay? You would say an intelligent person wrote my name, and they had to know the English language. They had to know how to write. They had to know how to communicate and want to communicate. They wrote my name, all right? And whatever your name is, 5 or 10 letters, whatever. Okay, well, the human DNA, to replicate a cell, that's 3.3 billion base pairs. So you know that your name couldn't, the wave could not have written your name. It's too complex for the wave to accidentally have written your name correctly. How can 3.3 billion base pairs just accidentally happen? It's not accidental. I mean, I don't understand it, but it's not accidental. And, you know, the brain, 100 billion neurons all working together correctly. That's not going to happen by accident. The old joke was you take 1,000 monkeys and you put them into a room with typewriters, they would type Shakespeare. No, they wouldn't. They've done that. And they just defecate on the typewriters, okay? And that's what happens when you try to have things happen by accident spontaneously, right? Okay. And that's also about what chimps are capable of. We're very different than chimpanzees. All the stuff to try to tell you you're just like a chimpanzee, it's not true. There's much bigger differences between humans and chimpanzees than is widely put into this typical, Mickey Mouse college evolutionary biology textbook. I majored in evolutionary biology in college. Okay, getting back to our ion gradients, you normally have very high potassium inside the cell and relatively low potassium outside the cell. You have high sodium outside the cell and low sodium inside the cell. With calcium, you're very high outside the cell and low inside the cell. Okay, so here's your potassium, here's your sodium. All right, we talked about things that cause dementia, the dilatory theory of chronic cerebral hypoperfusion based on him tying off the artery to the brain, the carotid artery, and then he figured there was stroke the mouse. He did an autopsy a couple months later, looks at the mouse brain, it's not stroked, it's just atrophic on the same side that he tied off the carotid, so that's apoptosis, okay? And then you say, well, how many people got an occluded carotid artery from atherosclerosis? Not that many, but it's analogous. A lot of people are hypertensive, they overtreat their hypertension, chronic decreased blood to the brain, chronic cerebral hypoperfusion, gradually apoptosis. I look at brains all the time. Most common thing I see on a demented brain is diffuse atrophy. Fits dilatory theory. Okay, what else will do that? Atrial fibrillation, chronic cerebral hypoperfusion, congestive heart failure, chronic cerebral hypoperfusion, obstructive sleep apnea, chronic hypoxia at night, every night. Diabetes, we'll sometimes get these episodes of hypoglycemia from overtreating their blood glucose, too much insulin. Overtreated hypertension, that's probably the most common one. Not enough blood supply to the brain. Why do you think your blood pressure is high in the first place? To get blood to the top of the brain. That's a harder spot to get when you're standing up or seated, is get it to the top of the brain. It's easy to get to the foot from gravity. Aortic stenosis, aortic regurg, post-CABG, coronary artery bypass graft hypotension. They run the patients quite hypotensive post-op. My dad went for open heart surgeries before I knew the benefits of the Esselstyn diet. They ran him like at 85/60. It's really low pressure. He came out of it okay, but I can imagine a lot of patients who are probably sicker than my dad. He was probably one of the healthiest patients that went for CABG. They're more at risk for cerebral ischemia. Okay, severe anemia and some other things too. I went through my whole neurovascular uncoupling theory in a different lecture, so we're not going to go through that again right now. I got video lectures on all of that at my YouTube channel. Okay, what gets interesting? We talked about mouse equivalents. Also, a lot of people have brain damage due to all these neurotoxic chemicals, like the hexane used to process soy, caffeine simultaneously being a cerebral artery vasoconstrictor, decreasing blood supply to the brain, while it's a stimulant, increasing neuronal activity. So you're going to cause neurovascular uncoupling. So these are all things that cause uncoupling. They're bad for all your cells. Okay, we mostly think of them in the context of leading to cognitive impairment. They probably have a negative effect on cancer too, but that's not our major focus. Over time here, I'll just show you what diabetes and hypertension do. The diabetes, so here's a normal basement membrane of a capillary. Here's a capillary, here's the red arrow for the direction of blood flow. These are red blood cells flowing through a capillary. You know they fold back on themselves to go through the capillary because the capillary is bigger than that, is smaller than them. They got to deform themselves to get through, and they got to deliver their oxygen. Typical capillary is about 5 microns in diameter. Typical red blood cell is about 7 microns in diameter. And then these little blue circles are their oxygen being released. They travel through the wall of the artery and they reach the tissue, in this case a neuron. Okay, so the point is chronic diabetes, you get thickening of the capillary basement membrane, this yellow line here, and that leads to less oxygen making it to the tissue. You also get hypertrophy and thickening of the muscles in this area. That can contribute to hypoxia. You don't have that much skeletal muscle right at the capillary level, but the thicker that artery wall gets, the less able you're going to be able to deliver oxygen. And the more chronic the hypertension, the more chronic and severe the diabetes, the more impaired that wall will become, and the less able you'll be able to deliver oxygen and glucose to your tissues. Okay, we'll talk a little bit now about estrogen and estrogenic chemicals. So basically, excessive estrogen causes all kinds of problems in a woman. It'll make her infertile because, you know, what is a birth control? EE2, ethinyl estradiol, okay? It can cause endometriosis. It can cause heavy bleeding, long, heavy periods. It can cause the growth of fibroid tumors, uterus hyperplasia of those cells, fibrocystic disease in the breast, increased breast cancer. Um, these are lymph node metastases of the breast. And we talk about, you know, deodorant increasing the risk of breast cancer because it's got aluminum in there. It's a metalloestrogen. Aluminum is what plugs up the sweat glands. And then they put preservatives in it like parabenzoic acids or equivalents. And those also are estrogenic. The lymphatics between the armpit, the axilla, and the breast are shared, especially the upper outer quadrant. Upper outer quadrant breast cancer back in the 1920s is about 25%. To 30%. Now it's about 60%, you know, because the lymphatics are shared between the two. And what's the typical thing a person does? Typical woman, she shaves her armpits, then she sprays deodorant on there, and it's stupid. It's stupid conformist behavior. You walk in a room, you say, hey, how you doing? You don't sniff each other's armpits like a dog, okay? You don't need to wear deodorant. And you don't need all these other cosmetic products, these perfumes and conditioners and colognes. All that stuff is estrogenic. The laundry detergent you put on your clothes, that's estrogenic. The container typically is BPA, bisphenol A. Then it's got phthalates, plastic conditioner, that's estrogenic. Then the detergent, something like nonylphenol, that's estrogenic. I don't use any detergent. I just throw my clothes in, extra hot water, run the cycle a little longer. Even the dryer, anti-wrinkle, little square things you throw into the dryer, those are estrogenic. And then you got that touching your skin all day. Your skin's largely lipid. In chemistry, like dissolves like. So the lipid is transdermally absorbed. The estrogens are lipids. They're transdermally absorbed through your skin, go right into your blood flow, go to your tissues. That's bad. Okay. If you drink something, let's say you drink milk, the cows are pregnant nowadays, at least your liver has a first pass effect to detoxify it and removes about 50%. Okay. And your clothing, it just touches your skin all day long. So these are some of the problems. In kids, it can cause, you know, undescended testicle in a little boy or hypospadia, you know, deformity of the penis. Okay, and then a lot of men walking around nowadays that are hyperestrogenic, they don't even know it. They go, oh, I've got a beer belly. Yeah, well, maybe it's an estrogen belly, okay, and they're man boobs or moobs. That's, you know, it's not just because you're fat. It's also a lot of times gynecomastia, meaning, you know, some female breast development in there. And they're overloaded with estrogenic chemicals from their beer and from all their estrogenic foods, their meat, and, you know, things like, you know, soy and flax and all this other estrogenic stuff. Here's this chemical structure of cholesterol and estrogen. So here's cholesterol. There's 4 cyclic rings. They're called ABCD. There's a hydroxy group on there. That's why it's cholesterol. Sterol is the steroid. There's an alcohol group on it. Choline because it's related to the bile. Estradiol, di means 2. All are the alcohol groups. So there's 1, 2 of them. The unique thing about the estrogen molecule is that the A ring isn't just a cyclohexane with 6 carbons, it also has 3 double bonds. So that's called an aromatic ring or a benzene ring. And these double bonds can move around. That's called to resonate. And the electrons can move around these 6 carbons. And that makes it highly stable. It can stay on a shell for years and not spoil. Putting a hydroxyl group on here, this combination of a hydroxyl group and a benzene ring is called a phenol group. And it's a wonderful thing from a chemical point of view in the sense that it's antimicrobial. So you put that as a preservative in all these products because it prevents mold growth. So the companies love these chemicals because it prevents their stuff from spoiling so it doesn't get returned to them. They make more money. And that's why this stuff will never go away. It's always going to be used as a preservative in products. So don't ever expect anyone else to change. You can only change yourself. Okay, so the way estrogen works is the hydroxyl group will form a hydrogen bond with the receptor. This is an estrogen receptor. And the estrogen receptor is not that fussy. Evolutionarily, there wasn't much competition for this until the modern world when all these synthetic chemicals were made. And some of these other foods became more available. So anyways, this is how hydrogen bond is formed in an estrogen receptor. And when this activates the estrogen receptor, secondary effects occur. Okay, and any chemical that's got this aromatic ring and a hydroxyl group on it, basically a phenol group, is likely to activate the estrogen receptor. And there's tons of them that have this. Here's a classic example. Here's BPA, bisphenol A. So bis means 2 phenols. There's 2 phenols. Bis really means 2 when they're not next to each other. Di would be 2 that are next to each other. Bis means 2 that are separate. So there's a phenol group here and a phenol group here. And this is called bisphenol A. Okay? And you just got a couple carbons over here. You got 3 carbons right here. All right, well, the reason why I show you that is because people say, oh, bisphenol is bad, BPA is bad, we want to ban it, don't put it in baby bottles, don't put it in anything else. Like a company goes, okay, fine, we'll ban BPA. They just throw sulfur in here, and now it's called BPS. Whoop-de-doo. It's the same thing. It's still a double phenol. So that's why you can never expect a company to ever change what they're going to do. Companies have billions of dollars. They're always going to do what's in their best interest. They don't care about people, so don't waste your time thinking that that's ever going to change. Okay, here's nonylphenol, like I was saying, dishwasher and laundry detergents. Again, you got a phenol group on there. You just throw a nonyl on here, 9 carbons. That doesn't really matter for our purposes. Here's the phenol group, activates the estrogen. And like I said, this is in any type of soap, detergent, shampoo. It's always going to be there. And a lot of other weird things you wouldn't even expect. Red dye number 40, red number 3. They're associated with red number 40 in particular. It's got a phenol-like group on it, okay? You can't escape these things. All you can do is minimize your exposure to them. You can't completely escape them. Okay, in sunscreen, like I don't wear sunscreen. I think sunscreen's stupid. I think it's more riskier than the sun. A lot of these will have phenol groups on them and be estrogenic. I make videos about all this stuff on my YouTube channel. Okay, here's an example of what happens with estrogen metabolism. Normally what happens is our body excretes estrogen. It goes to our liver conjugates it, and it puts like a glucuronic acid on there, and then it goes into our bile, and we excrete it out, we defecate it out of our system. That's how we lower our estrogen levels. And there's basically 2 types of gut flora. One is the good gut flora. When you eat plant-based diet, you have a lot of fiber. The fiber feeds the good gut bacteria. They convert dietary fats into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, and the enterocytes maintain themselves with that. Okay, that's the good gut flora from plants. The bad gut flora come from eating meat and processed foods. Meat has no fiber, processed foods very little fiber. In that case, a different type of bacteria grow in your gut. These have an increased amount of an enzyme called glucuronidase. Here it is written out, glucuronidase. Glucuronidase, so normally let's say you had your estrogen conjugated. This is the estrogen, the blue, and the green thing was the glucuronic acid. Okay, this enzyme comes along and says nope, and it cuts the green off. So now when you've unconjugated that estrogen, it's no longer bound to the glucuronic acid. This estrogen is reabsorbed into your blood. So you can see it right here. This estrogen is going to get reabsorbed into the blood. So the estrogen levels go back up. And that's why people who eat meat and processed foods have much higher estrogen levels. And there's a lot of estrogen in tap water too. So like I said, I know women, they've personally told me, every single woman in my family had to get a hysterectomy before age 35 because of fibroids, okay? And all these women are drinking tap water, and they eat a lot of meat, okay? And they eat a lot of processed food, and they don't eat hardly any plants. So you don't want to do that because that dramatically increases your risk of breast cancer. Plus, when you get a hysterectomy at a young age, it increases your risk of heart failure, increases your risk of dementia, hypertension, etc. Whenever I see an abnormal brain in a woman less than 60 years of age, and she doesn't have any other major issues, health issues. She's not a smoker, she's not a drug addict or something. Quite often I'll find the reason why she became demented at a young age was because she had a hysterectomy at a young age and became quite hypertensive and wasn't aware of it. Okay, this was just showing the deal with this lady here, so the joke is basically this lady has estrogen, she's a premenopausal woman, she's got breasts, she's got a Virginia down here, okay? I know why she has a lot of estrogen. She's put it to very good use, okay? But why does a soy plant have high estrogen? It doesn't have breasts, it doesn't have a Virginia. Maybe it's because, like a birth control pill is highly estrogenic, and it wants to make the animal that eats it infertile. Not every plant wants to be eaten. Some plants want to be eaten, and then the animal ingests its seeds and poops them out and helps the plant to grow in other locations. Some plants don't want to be eaten, and maybe that's soy. Maybe that's why it's also goitrogenic and can be harmful to her thyroid. Okay? And it does affect both the alpha and the beta receptors. Okay? People say, oh, it only affects the good receptor. No, it affects both of them. Read the paper for yourself. You'll see that's the case. Okay, and then people say, well, patients were more healthy when they ate soy. A lot of times that's because of a switch out effect, in the sense that if you got rid of the meat and the dairy in the diet and you replace it with, let's say, soy milk, okay? Soy milk's going to be more healthy for you than dairy milk, but it's still not good for you, okay? Soy is high fat. It's got a lot of problems. Usually it's GMO. It's hexane processed. It's sprayed with GP. I don't ever eat it. I avoid it completely. I think the people who think it's good are either ignorant or they're lying to you. Okay, it's not good for you. Okay, that's actually not very popular in the vegan community for me to tell you the truth about soy. But, like I said, I don't care, I think I'm kind of becoming like the bad boy of the vegan community because I just tell you the truth and I don't care. I don't have a dog in the game, okay? I got kicked out of a Facebook group for criticizing soy. Go back and read all these papers. There's all these papers on soy before it became a $1 billion product saying how bad and terrible it was. Now that it's a $1 billion product, it's got like all this bogus industry funded studies trying to claim it's good. Okay, what are the problems with the vegan diet? You get skinnier and healthier and your family gets jealous of you for aging better than them. Okay, I talked about that before. Okay, and then why was I talking about Pascal's wager in health? I guess I was saying it's like the vegan diet. Or I was also talking about religion. Did I throw this religion thing in here? Well, I am impressed by Christianity. I see what it does for people. I saw it enrich my mom's life, so many people's lives. And basically, it creates the best paintings, the best sculpture, the best illustrators, the best architecture, the best novels. I mean, it's doing a lot of things right. Yeah, I know the church has been taken over by scumbags and it's corrupted. But that's one of the reasons why, I wanted to be a great writer, a great thinker, a great genius. I wanted all those things. And I'm like, well, these are the guys who are doing it. The best scientist who ever lived was Isaac Newton. The best music is primarily Christian. And look at the best composers: Bach, Handel, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Schubert. Okay, it energizes people. And Buettner's Blue Zones, they're all religious. Seventh-day Adventists, Christians in Loma Linda, California, are the healthiest, longest lived people in the world. So what I say is, all these people, all these great achievements are doing something right. The whole scientific method came from Catholicism. If you study the history of it, this is obvious. That's not even disputed. It's obvious to anybody who studies it. Okay, my little version of the diet, I call it the Spartan vegan diet, kind of like Spartan in the sense that it's sparse and simple, and also in the sense that I used to be a wrestler in college and everything. Okay, I think I already showed you this dietary pyramid, very simple. This was sort of joking around. I made a diet nirvana pyramid, where I talked about the paleo keto at the bottom as health hell for morons, and the sad diet for sick, stupid, unattractive, untouchable, minimum wage proles drinking tap water dead at 50 to 65, and then the Mediterranean diet, the next step up of pseudo-intellectual ignoramuses, Ivy League faculty BS artists with cheese, wine, etc. And then another step up to lacto-ovo-pesco, another step up to philosophic vegans who still eat a high-fat vegan diet, another step up to get rid of all the processed food, and then finally you reach the Spartan vegan full nirvana level. So just kidding around, had some fun with that. Okay, here's the Spartan vegan plate, anti-cancer diet plate, basically like we just said. Most of your calories from starch, a lot of calories from fruits. You can do more fruits if you can afford it and they're available and they're not sprayed with this A-peel stuff. Filter your water from your kitchen, at least with a carbon filter. Eat some veggies. You could increase that if that's doable for you. A lot of the healthiest ones seem to increase their veggies a lot. Oh, this is just a joke that I said. You could have a vegan clinic with like the smallest budget and just puts all its based on a vegan diet. And you could have it next to the typical giant industrial university hospital. And the little patient at this little vegan clinic will be way healthier than the ones over here. No medical, surgical bullshitology can keep these arteries open if you don't eat the right diet. There's some old saying that if you eat the right diet, you probably won't need a doctor. If you eat the wrong diet, good luck finding a doctor who can save you. Okay, don't get me wrong. The medical system is actually really good at treating acute disease, but that's especially things like trauma, fall down and, fractured a bone or stuff like that. And some acute problems, antibiotics work well for some infections, for example, a lot of bacterial infections. So it is good at doing some stuff. It really is. It's good at end of life stuff, putting a person on dialysis, transplanting a kidney or liver, all that is wonderful. But for most people, they got chronic disease, hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and the best thing they can do for that is to fix the diet and their lifestyle and avoid the toxins. I like this quote by Tom Wolfe. He's a great American writer. He said, "Modern buildings look like animal cages, and they always have a statue of a turd in front." Yeah, it's a disgrace. Modern art is a disgrace. It's all fake. It's sort of, I don't like it at all. Okay, the best, most beautiful buildings ever built were the Catholic Gothic cathedrals, especially in France. Okay, that's the epitome of what mankind can do in architecture, and the indoors of it is so beautiful, and the way the paintings go with the sculptures, and the high arch ceilings like an awe to God. The high forest canopy. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. Those are high points in human achievement. Okay, this is just a quick picture to remind you why you want to, get your fiber. You get your fiber if you eat plant foods because it softens the stool. It pulls water into the stool, and then the stool should come out. You should poop. You should be pooping at least about twice a day. There might be a day where you only poop once, but normally you should be pooping at least twice a day. On a day off when you're not working, you probably should be pooping at least three times, if not 4 or 5 times. That would be normal. Okay, that's what plant eaters do. Constipation, straining at the stool because a hard stool coming out like a Tootsie Roll instead of like a cow patty with the vegan causes back pressure. The back pressure pushes on the sigmoid colon, causes outpouching, causes diverticulosis. Those can pop, causing diverticulitis. Causes the stomach to pop up into the chest. That's hiatal hernia. You get reflux of acid in there. That causes gastroesophageal reflux disease. That can lead to transformation of the intestinal lining there, and that's called Barrett's esophagus, which is a premalignant lesion predisposing you to esophageal cancer. Okay, dried out stool on the right side from the lack of fiber will cause a penicillin or Rocco stool, fecalith it's also called, and that'll block the appendix. The mucus glands below keep secreting, and then it can pop. That's appendicitis. Down pressure into the leg causes varicose veins. Down pressure into the scrotum causes varicocele. This is why constipation can cause infertility. It heats up the guy's balls with the varicocele. It can also cause rectal hemorrhoids. Anyways, there's just a whole bunch of things that lack of fiber will do. So just eat your fiber and eat it from the plants. Don't just supplement with fiber. It's much better to eat the real thing. Okay, some of the stuff, I don't want to confuse or go into too much details, but the bottom line is high-fat diets cause insulin resistance, and that leads to cognitive impairment because the brain also is dependent on insulin. They used to think it wasn't. They used to think that the brain only had glucose type 1 and glucose type 3 transporters, but it also has glucose type 4 transporters, which are insulin dependent. Glucose 1 and glucose 3 are not insulin dependent. I've got entire lectures on does diabetes cause cognitive impairment, and yes, it does. Diabetes patients are so pathetic. They're some of the stupidest people I know, and I just feel sorry for them. I talk to tons of them, and they're just really sad. They're cognitively slow, and usually what happens when they were younger, in their 40s and 50s, they kept saying, "Oh, it's under control, it's under control." No, it's not. Unless you go vegan, it's not under control. And the same things, watching out for that overtreatment of hypertension, because you need to get blood supply to your brain. The best way to do it is fix your diet so that your body's much better at regulating it than some pill would be. Okay, let's see what else I got here. Oh, this is just a quick look at the different types of fats. So sat fat is all saturated with hydrogens. Okay, a MUFA is a monounsaturated. The unsaturation means a double bond. Mono, there's only one double bond. PUFA is polyunsaturated fatty acid, meaning there's more than one double bond. Okay, these are real prone to lipid peroxidation. The reason is these double bonds are pulling on the electrons, so it makes it easy to pluck off this hydrogen and then create a whole chain reaction of lipid peroxidation, chemical reactions with reactive oxygen species. It's not good. Okay, that's why you don't want to be seeking them out. You wouldn't want to supplement yourself and give yourself more than you need. There's plenty of omega-3s in plant foods. Okay, this was just a slide showing that glutamine can come in the back door and enter the mitochondria, and Krebs cycle can run entirely off glutamine. So, you're not going to win the game with these paleo keto diets that are high in protein and you're getting all this glutamine coming in the back door. It's not going to work. I don't think it is. My understanding of pathophysiology says it's not going to work. Okay, we already showed that. You saw, oh, this is a picture one of my kids drew. I thought this was pretty cool. This basically is, playing chess with death. The hourglass is running down slowly, and the man is trying to, make his move to try to keep death from winning the game. So he's going to try to hold him off as long as he can. I thought this was a rather elegant, beautiful painting. Oh, some of the most memorable lines in vegan history. Okay, I don't know how I just threw this in, I thought, for curiosity. I'll sometimes do that in a book. I have something that I thought was entertaining. Okay, McDougall said a lot of great things. All healthy populations eat a starch-based diet. There are no exceptions. He said other good things. Oh, I'm going to quote him later in other spots. Dennis Burkett, high dietary fiber protects you from abdominal pressure syndrome. Yep. Durian Ryden said, sugar is the most powerful performance enhancer for your brain, your muscles, and your dog. I'm not saying eat sugar. I just thought he was kind of funny. He's kind of a funny guy, and he's athletic and he trains. So, but don't take that as advice. This is just something I thought was entertaining. Okay. On that one was really McDougall phrased more than me. Fruit tastes great, but they're less filling than starches. That's true. I know that to be true. That's not such a great saying. Okay, Esselstyn, no oil, moderation kills. Coronary artery disease doesn't have to exist. It's a paper tiger. You don't see it in the countries that eat plant-based. Nathan Pritikin, fat is bad. These are quotes about lipid. No such thing as a normally occurring diet deficient in fat. You can do, in controlled studies, they gave people less than 1% fat, 0.75%. They did very well. Roy Swank, figuring out MS. Okay, so we don't need to get into all this stuff. This is kind of a little bit all over the place. Now, sometimes in a book, I'll throw stuff in for entertainment value. Okay, now it gets mostly into the paper part of the book, and that's a little bit boring. I don't know if I'm going to even go through any of this stuff here. I might just go down to the bottom. So this will be a little bit tedious. Sorry about all this. But this is sort of a more detailed summary of all the information about preventing cancer that I got in the book. I got some pictures coming up here at the end. And I think that'll be sort of to close it out. I'll just close it out in this lecture here. So we're not going to go through all that stuff, all this text on cancer. And it'll just be what I talked about, but in much more detail. Oh, this picture just here shows flax is off the chart in estrogenic. I mean, soy is like thousands of times more estrogen than other foods, and then flax is way more estrogenic than soy. I would never eat that stuff. I like my macho masculinity, high testosterone self. I don't want all this estrogenic BS. Modern population's brainwashed. I think they subsidize soy to sterilize all the low IQ people. Okay, and atrazine also, all that non-organic foods is subsidized, I think, to sterilize low IQ people. Okay, it's good to walk when you're reading. It increases your attention. You get a little exercise. I often do that when I come home. That's a typical thing I'll do. My concentration improves when I stand up and walk. In my old house that I used to love, I used to have a tennis wall to hit tennis balls against, put the net up in the back there. I loved it and played basketball back there. But I might have told you I went a little too far. I came home from work one day and my kid says to me, "Dad, you're a bad parent." I think he was going into 7th grade at the time. And I say, "Why do you say that, buddy?" And he goes, "Because you don't help me. The other kids' dads, they help them with basketball. The coach helps his son with basketball. And the other dads practice with their sons." And he says, "All you do is work all the time." We had this living room here with a wood floor, a high ceiling. We weren't using it for anything but storage. And that had been going on for a couple years. So I had a carpenter friend. We boarded up the windows, brought a basketball court inside, moved out all this furniture. Of course, I did it when the wife was at work. I knew she would say no. But the kids loved it. The kid practiced for hours a day. He became one of the stars of the team, and all the friends would want to come over. It was great. We loved this basketball court. I loved to get some exercise in there when it was cold outside. But my wife went apeshit bananas, and she said that I was lowering the property value of the house, that I was going to crash the foundations. We wouldn't be able to sell the house. The house was going to collapse. And she was embarrassed about it, didn't want company to see it, on and on. And, there's a little more to the story than this. I had converted the upstairs bedroom into a racquetball court. I actually did a whole bunch of things with the house. I loved it. I designed the whole thing. The whole basement was a work. I think she said it's not an effing gymnasium. And she ended up buying a new house, and I went with her because I didn't want, the kids to grow up without a dad. We would have gotten divorced. My basketball playing son said to me, "Dad, I can't believe you let mom control you like that. You're such a pussy. I've lost all respect for you." And I said, "Look, buddy, I did this for your sake." No, but gosh, I wish I kept the old house. I should have divorced her and kept the old house. But anyways, now it's okay. The reason at my new house, it's sort of like her house. And because she runs the place, she's like my secretary, if you will. I don't have to do anything at the new house. I used to have to manage everything at the old house, including manage the pool. I had a giant pool and take care of the lawn, pay all the bills. Now it's her problem. So the fact that we live in a new house and she runs the whole place. We've lived in this new house for some time now, many years now. I got time to write books and make YouTube videos, even though I'm working full time still. But I like doing that. Oh, this was my magic bathroom that I had when I studied for my neuroradiology boards. I was told that I had a perfect score. It's a verbal boards. They don't give you an official written score, but unofficially, my examiner told my department chairman guy that I had gotten a perfect score. I used to tape all the pictures of neuroanatomy and diseases to the wall, and I walk in my bathroom and I'd be able to memorize them all. I have nothing in here but clear soap. I had friends that would lift weights in my basement. They would use this liquid soap. I don't use that crap. I would just have a little transparent bar of soap down there. I put other pictures of my heroes up on my wall. There's actually a picture of Esselstyn right there. And there's a picture of Rodney Dangerfield, the comedian. I loved him. There's a picture of Victor Hugo, the writer. There's a picture of Aristotle. Okay. Anyways, that really helped for studying. This is a little portable table in front of the loo. I'd always read a book on there, and I always have another table up here. I'd read paperbacks, number ones. I'd read textbooks during number twos. That really helped me to read a lot. I got two pictures of Esselstyn in there. What's going on? Stick with your stuff like the Ten Commandments. Okay, and then obey the Ten Commandments in nutrition. And then this is sort of a little bit of parody on the Bible, Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. Go ye and teach all people in the name of the starch, the fruit, and the vegetable. Baptize them with beet juice and give them communion with a circular piece of potato. Teach them to observe all things I have shown you. And behold, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Okay, so that's the end of the book. I hope that was helpful to you.